Sukkah, Dafim Chav Gimel through Chav Tes. On Daf Chav Gimel, the Gemara brings a drasha, Amar Kra, Chag HaSukkah is Tasel Lecha Shivas Yamim, Sukkah Ru'uya L'Shiva Shma Sukkah, Sukkah She'ena Ru'uya L'Shiva Lo Shma Sukkah. A sukkah has to be suitable, when you build a sukkah, it has to be suitable to last, to be a valid sukkah, to be intact for the entire 7 days of Sukkahs. A sukkah that won't be suitable for all 7 days is not a valid sukkah. The Ramah in Shulchan Aruch Paskins a din that's brought in the Ran, Kol Ma Shedarka Liyavish B'toch Shiva. He's talking about the schach. If the schach is going to shrivel and dry out and fall away or lose its volume over the course of Sukkot, over the course of the 7 days of Sukkot, miyad danina leikiluhu yavish. We view it as if it's already dried up and the sukkah is not valid. So the Bir Halacha, the Achronim bring a discussion that what does it mean it'll dry out? It'll totally dry out, it'll just dry out to the point, or even if it'll just dry out to the point where it won't be tilasim ru mechamasa, it won't be mostly shade, enough of it will dry out, a critical amount will dry out, that the remainder will be chamasim ru mitilasa. The Lavush says that even in that case, even if only some of it will dry out, but it's to the point that it will no longer be tilasim ru mechamasa, it'll be chamasim ru mitilasa, even that's puzzle right away, even before it dries out. And the Lavush says the reason is it's Gzeira. It's Gzeira the Chachamim because we're afraid that it'll dry out over Sukkot and you won't notice it, and it'll dry out over Sukkot and it'll be too late to build a new one. And that's where they said, don't get involved in such a Sukkah, don't build such a Sukkah to begin with. So the Lavush says it's a Psol D'Rabbanan. The truth is that our Gemara brings a drasha. Our Gemara sounds like it is a Din Daraisa. Pri Megadim brings that, despite what the Lavush says, he says the Rambam and the Torah are mashma, that if it's going to dry out, it's a psul deraisa. We view it as right now, it's not valid schach. It's not just a gzeira d'rabbanan that you'll end up being stuck without a sukkah. The Pri Megadim then says that distinguishes, it depends how much it's going to dry out. He says in the case of the Lavush, where only some of it will dry out, and you'll still have schach there, but it'll be chamasim meruba mitzilasa, that's a din d'rabbanan. But in the case where it'll dry out entirely and just totally fall away, that is a din daraisa. It's not roy l'shiva. It's hard to see where those two dinim come from exactly, but that's a possible compromise. Elsewhere, the Ramah brings a din that this applies to the walls as well. The Ramah says even the walls of the sukkah, which as we've discussed previously, don't have all the eligibility criteria for schach, but even the walls of the sukkah, if it's something that'll dry out and you won't have a sher mechitza, that's also something that you shouldn't do. Shalom Meshav discusses how this would apply to the other mitzvah of Sukkah, to the mitzvah of lulav. He discusses if you have a lulav that is yavesh is pasul, but if it's not yet yavesh, but it's on its way, it will be yavesh during Sukkot. Do we say that as long as it's still not yavesh, it's not dried out yet, it's kosher, or do we say, just like Sukkah, that if it's going to dry out over Sukkot, it's not valid, maybe the lulav also? He says, we could say, no, lulav is different, because lulav, we have a drasha. Our Gemara brings a drasha that you need sukkah ru'yu l'shiva. So that's a special drasha of sukkah, and maybe that wouldn't apply to lulav. He has a long discussion on this question of what's the status of a lulav that will dry out, is expected to dry out over sukkahs. On Daf Chav Daled, the Mishnah says if someone makes a sukkah using trees, and the trees are the walls, it's kshera. The Gemara brings a din, a mechitza that's eini yachol lamed baruch mitzuya, a mechitza that is so flimsy that it can't withstand a normal wind, a common wind, a baruch mitzuya, is not a valid mechitza. What about the trees? The Gemara says, "Hakaz l'vasi." The branches of the trees will, or even the trunks of the trees will move around. So they can't withstand Ruach Matsuya. The Gemara says, "No, Bekashin ilanos zikanim v'avim." Rashi says we're talking about thick, sturdy trees that don't move around. What about the branches? Nofo, the Gemara asks, did they move around? Even if the trunk of the tree is stable, but the branches move around. So the Gemara says you have to add that you have to tie it down. You have to arrange it in a canal. If it's part of the wall, you have to arrange it in such a way that it won't move. Shulchan Aruch, we pass in this way that the trees can be a valid mechitza if they're either chazakim, if they're strong, or if you tie them down and you strengthen them so that Ruach Matsuya doesn't move them. The question is how much movement are we talking about? So the Shulchan Aruch just says that we require Shalotehe Ruach Mitzuya Menida, that a wind will not move them. The Gemara says, Ka'azl v'asi is a problem. The Shulchan Aruch says if the wind moves them, it's a problem. Mishnah Berurah explains that even if it can't knock them down entirely, the wind won't blow them down altogether, the wind will just move them somewhat, that itself is a problem, that it's not a valid mechitza. This is a major discussion in the later Achronim. How much movement are we talking about? It seems any movement, even if it's not 3 tfachim, it won't lift them 3 tfachim off the ground, it won't necessarily move them 3 tfachim back and forth. If the wind moves them at all, that's a problem. Shlomo Zalman Auerbach is medayik this, they bring. Mishkenas Yaakov makes this point. Various other Achronim, Rav Yashuv, and many Achronim say that a sukkah, the wall of a sukkah that moves at all, even if it doesn't move any particular amount, can be a problem. Other poskim say that, no, the Chazon Ish says it's only if the wind moves it to the point that in the place the wind moves it to, it won't be a valid mechitza. So that if the wind blows it so that it goes more than 3 tfachim off the floor, as we've seen previously, the mechitza, that's a mechitza, shegedim bokim bo, mechitza has to be within 3 tfachim of the ground. So if the wind blows it more than 3 tfachim off the ground, with 3 tfachim off the ground, that's a problem. Other poskim say that even if the wind blows it to a place where it's still kosher, but if it blows it too far, it's a problem. Moshe Feinstein and some other poskim say 3 tfachim. If the movement is 3 tfachim, it's a problem. They bring from Rav Yashuv that even 1 tefach maybe 1 tefach l'chatchila, it shouldn't be there. It shouldn't move even a tefach. So this is a major machlokes achronim. How far does the mechitza have to move for it to be? This comes up in Eruvin as well. Here in the context of Sukkah, Rav Moshe says that in Sukkah the standard could be stricter because it says Teishvu Kein Taduru, that it loses the shem mechitza as long as it's not so dira-like. So poskim have different opinions about this, and this is a common problem with canvas sukkahs. Even if they're tied down properly, still the wind, they blow a little bit in the wind. Maybe not 3 tfachim, depends on how sturdily they're tied, but they do move somewhat. So this is a major problem with canvas sukkahs, that if you machmer for the stricter interpretations that wind shouldn't move them at all, then canvas sukkahs are problematic. So one eitzah is, which is already mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch, is that if you, in addition to the canvas, you take straps or ropes and tie them in parallel lines around the sukkah within 3 tfachim of each other. So even if you ignore the mechitza is problematic because it moves. But if you have taut straps or taut strings around the sukkah within 3 tfachim up to the first 10 tfachim, the straps become a mechitza, the strings become a mechitza. Many people who use canvas sukkahs do this as well. And in addition to the canvas, they use these straps or ropes or strings to be a mechitza shel chavalim, loved mechitza, each one within 3 tfachim of the ground and each one within 3 tfachim of the next, up to 10 tfachim in order for it to be a valid mechitza. And the truth is, canvas sukkahs are potentially problematic for another reason. Even if they don't move, the Shulchan Aruch already talks about canvas sukkahs. He brings it from the Rishonim. He talks of mechitzas of Uriah shel pishtan, made out of cloth, of flax. Even if you tie it down, he says, we're worried that it will become untied. Zimran demintiki v'lavadaite. It may become untied and you won't realize it, and then it'll be a mechitza that's not. If it gets untied, it'll be mechitza shenichal lamad b'pnei ruach mitzuya. So the Shulchan Aruch suggests, because he brings this chumrah of the Rishonim not to use textile mechitzas at all, so he says that if you're going to use them, it's recommended that you have the mechitzas kanim, that you use the sticks or the reeds or the ropes to make an independent mechitza and not to rely on the mechitza of fabric, because that can become untied and then it won't be lamed b'nei ruach mitzuya. Won't be able to be lamed b'nei ruach mitzuya. So contemporary poskim as well discussed in the canvas sukkahs this problem as well. Even if we ignore the problem that while it's tied it can actually move, even if we say you tie it down properly, but there's a chumrah that it can become untied. So there are some poskim who say that the Gemara is talking about we only tie it on one side, but if you tie it on all sides, then you don't have to worry, it'll become untied. Other poskim say that there's no real mention of this distinction in the Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch says that we're afraid it'll become untied. So even a properly tied canvas sukkah, even if it won't actually move, there's this other reason, this gzeira, that it'll become untied. So for these two reasons, canvas sukkahs are problematic. They were and still are quite common. And again, you can alleviate the problems by making an independent mechitza of chavalim, of straps or ropes, to be a separate mechitza, a halachic mechitza based on lavud, so that even if the canvas or even if the fabric is not a valid mechitza, you'll still have a valid mechitza out of the strings of the straps. On Daf Tafei, the Mishnah says, Shluchei mitzvah p'turim min sukkah. People who are engaged in a mission of mitzvah are exempt from sukkah. And this is because Osip mitzvah patur min mitzvah. There's Machlokes Rashi and Tosfos here. Rashi says, "Afilu b'shas chaniyasin." Even when they're camped, they're in the hotel for the night. They're not actually traveling and involved in doing the mitzvah. They're still exempt from sukkah. Tosfos says he doesn't understand that. Tosfos says if you can do both, if you're not traveling, you're not doing anything about the mitzvah right now, you're just in the overall journey of the mitzvah. Why should you be pater? Person wears tzitzis, he wears tefillin, he's doing a mitzvah, tzitzis and tefillin. You can tell me he's pater from other mitzvahs while he's doing that? That doesn't make any sense. So Tosfos says, you have to say, when our Gemara says, shluchei mitzvah are exempt from sukkah, that's only in such a context where if they would start getting involved in sukkah, that would wind up interfering, hampering their ability to do the other mitzvahs. So Tosfos Shita is, we only say osik mitzvah pater and mitzvah in general, not just in sukkah. In all contexts, we only say osik mitzvah pater and mitzvah when doing the new mitzvah will interfere with your ability to do the first mitzvah. But Shitas Rashi seems to be, even at night, when you're camped, it won't interfere. Still, as long as you're considered to be involved in the first mitzvah, you're pater even if it won't interfere. We actually paskin, the Halachos says, we actually paskin in a closer to Rashi. We actually paskin that despite the fact that Tosfos and the Rush say that if you can do both, you have to do both, we paskin like the Ran, that Beis Yosef, the Ramasim to paskin this way, that we paskin like the Ran, or Zerua, that even if it will not interfere, as long as you're considered to be involved in the first mitzvah, you don't have to do the second mitzvah, even if it won't interfere with the first mitzvah. What about the question about tzitzis and tefillin? Does it really make sense to say a person's wearing tzitzis or wearing tefillin, he doesn't have to do any other mitzvahs? So they explain, the poskim explain, that's different. Everyone agrees, or almost everyone agrees, that that's pater, that you're going to be chayav. You're not going to say osik mitzvah pater and mitzvah when you're wearing tzitzis and tefillin, because that's not called osik mitzvah. You're not doing anything. You just happen to have tefillin. You get a mitzvah maybe, but you're not called being osik. Masha'en came, the fellow who's traveling, we paskin your pater even at night. The halach is ben b'yom ben b'layla. We're going to paskin in Shulchan Aruch that the shluchim mitzvah pater min sukkah ben b'yom ben b'layla. And even if you're only traveling during the day, you're pater at night as well. The Mishnah Berurah explains why. Because you're being osik mitzvah. Even if it won't interfere, you can possibly build a sukkah. It won't hamper your ability to do the mitzvah. The mitzvah is not till the next day. Nevertheless, you're trudin b'machshavas mitzvah. You're thinking about the mitzvah. You're planning it. That's called osik mitzvah. And we pass in that osik mitzvah is pater min mitzvah, even if it won't interfere with the first mitzvah. That we pass in that you are still pater. However, then it says in the Shulchan Aruch, Ayin La'el Siman Lamed Ches, to look earlier. Mishnah Berurah explains that means that even according to the sheet of the Ran, that osik mitzvah is pater min mitzvah, even though it won't interfere, that's only when doing the second mitzvah will require some activity. You have to be tarech, you have to go find the sukkah. However, if it doesn't require any tarech at all, there's a sukkah right in front of you, then certainly you have to go into the sukkah. You're not going to be pater from doing the second mitzvah. If it's trivial, if it's easy, if the sukkah is right here, then you should do the mitzvah. So it comes out that there are three levels. There's a case where it's extremely easy to do the second mitzvah, it's trivial, it's right here, then everyone agrees that you don't see osik mitzvah pater min mitzvah and you have to eat in the sukkah. A case where doing the second mitzvah will interfere with the first mitzvah and prevent it, and everyone agrees that you say osik mitzvah pater min mitzvah, even Tosfos. The middle case where it won't really interfere, but you are considered being actively osik in the mitzvah, and doing the second mitzvah would require some effort, then we paskin that you're pater based on Ran, maybe Rashi also, that you're still pater even at night. In that case, Tosfos night sechaya, but we paskin pater that the sukkah is not right here. You have to start looking and making arrangements to get a sukkah. We paskin pater even if it won't interfere with the first mitzvah, as long as you are considered to be actively osik mitzvah in the first mitzvah, even at night. You're not actually doing it, but you're thinking about it and you're absorbed in it. You're pater. You don't have to be matriach to find a sukkah. Biur brings from the Chasim Sofer that that's only when the mitzvah is entirely l'shem shemayim and you're not getting any personal benefit from the mitzvah. But if someone is paying you to do a mitzvah, so even if you are doing a mitzvah, but if you're getting paid for it and you have personal interest, then we don't say osik mitzvah pater min mitzvah, even though it is a mitzvah. And the Chasim Sofer explains that a mitzvah that's being done purely for altruistic motives, l'shem shemayim, is a great mitzvah. A mitzvah that's being done for schar is less of a mitzvah, and on such a mitzvah we don't say osik mitzvah pater min mitzvah. They bring from Nissen Karelitz that if someone is invited to his parents to visit them, they don't have a sukkah and they can't have a sukkah, it's not practical for them, you're allowed to go, and we say osi mitzvah, patur mitzvah, because that's a mitzvah of kibbutz aveim. The implication is if his parents should have a sukkah and they don't, then maybe it's not so simple. If you can build, he says, if you can build a sukkah there, you can make a sukkah for them. If it's not practical to have a sukkah at your parents, then you're considered osik mitzvah, patur mitzvah, to go there and not sit in the sukkah. On Daf Chavav, this sukkah continues. We have another category, a related category of patur from sukkah, holchei drachim. Those who are traveling are patur from the sukkah, but unlike osik mitzvah, we pass in our patur b'yom and b'layla. Holchei drachim, we say, if they're holchem b'yom, they're chayav b'layla. If they're holchem b'layla, then they're chayav b'yom. And that's how we pass in the Shulchan Aruch. If they're holchem by day and by night, then they're patur during the day and during the night. If they're holech during the day, they're patur during the day and chayav at night. If they're holech at night, they're patur at night and they're chayav during the day. The Ramah adds various qualifications. That which we say that they're chayav at night is only if they can find a sukkah, but if they can't find a sukkah, then they don't have to stop the mitzvah and get a sukkah. They're even allowed to leave l'chatchila on this journey of the derech and not worry about the sukkah. And the Ramah gives different dinim of how this halacha applies. Why is holchei drachim patur? It's different from the patur of osik mitzvah. So the Mishnah Berurah says, Teishvu kein tadur am rachmana. That the mitzvah of sukkah is to live in the sukkah the way you live in your house. A person lives in his house, but he also takes trips sometimes. And therefore, if a person takes a trip, he's patur from sukkah. There is a major machlokus about this. Since the patur is not because of mitzvah, but it's because of teishvu kein taduru, one might think that it applies even to a discretionary trip, a trip just for vacation or for leisure. A tiyul, the Israeli poskim talk about. Just like when I'm at my house, teishvu kein taduru. Just like when I'm at my house, I leave my house to go on leisure activities. When I'm in a sukkah, I can leave the sukkah to go on leisure activities and not sit in the sukkah. And that is indeed what many poskim say. Many poskim say that even to just take a purely fun, discretionary trip on Yom Tov is mutter. This is the position they bring from Rav Aaron Lichtenstein, Rav Yaakov Ariel, Rav Asher Weiss, Rav Zalman Nechemia Goldberg, from Earl Yashu, from Nissen Karelitz, that Mikra Adin, it's mutter to take a purely discretionary leisure trip on Sukkot, and you'll be patur from the Sukkah because of holchei drachim patur min Sukkah. Many poskim are more strict. Many poskim say that holchei drachim only applies to business trips, important trips that you need to do, doesn't apply to leisure, to discretionary trips. Notably, Ramosha Feinstein. Ramosha says that holchei drachim only applies to things that everyone would do. Leisure is an idiosyncrasy. You might do it, someone else won't do it. Not everyone would go on such a tiyul. Ramosha says the patur is related to mitzvah. You have to actually have discomfort. If you can't go on a business trip, you need money, you can't do your job, that's mitzvah. You want to go on a trip, then that's not called mitzvah. Furthermore, Ramosha says, the famous Gemara Menachos, the Gemara brings Rav Katina. Rav Katina had garments that did not have four corners, so he didn't wear tzitzis. You're not mechayev. If you wear a four-corner garment, you have to put on tzitzis. If your garments don't have four corners, then you're patur. Nevertheless, the Malach reprimanded him and said that's an avera. So Rav Katina said, really? Is that really an avera? So the Malach said, Be'idon derischa. When Hashem is upset, he punishes people for not doing mitzvahs that they could do. Says Moshe, even if you're technically patur, but since you don't have to go on this trip, you're foregoing a mitzvah saseh, and you shouldn't do that. And furthermore, it's only tainuk ba'alma, he says, that the patur of holchei drachim, Rashi says, is business trips that you need, not luxuries, not pleasure trips. Regarding Rav Katina, the argument from Rav Katina, from Idon Derischa, Rav Yasha points out, the Rishonim say that the Ikra Din of Idon Derischa is only when you go out of your way, you do tachbulos, you do tricks to avoid a mitzvah say. If you don't go out of your way, you just behave as you normally do. In that time, in Chazal's time, people normally did have four-cornered garments. Not like today, we only have these garments when we want to be Mekayim the mitzvah. In Rav Katina's time, Tosha says they used to wear those kinds of garments, and he went out of his way not to, so that you get punished for. But just doing what you normally do, and mainly you patur for a mitzvah, mikra din, that's not even the riska. The truth is, though, Ramosha himself holds, I believe, in other contexts, that even that is not the right thing to do. Ramosha says a person should wear a beged shel dalet conference. You can't just say, well, today, it's not a tachbula, today we don't wear those kind of garments, so I'm patur. We say no, that l'chatchila, a person should actively try to mekayim the mitzvah. But Ramosha held the person should wear wool, not l'chatchila should wear wool, not even polyester or cotton, because it's a machlokas whether other begadim are chayav midaraisa, and he should be mekayim the mitzvah even l'chatchila, according to all opinions midaraisa. So Ramosha held that a person should try to do a mitzvah say. Others argue, well, a trip can be important. It's a time to get together with your family, especially because we encourage people to take vacation on Chol HaMoed, so they shouldn't have to work on Chol HaMoed. At least let people go on trips. But Lamaisa, the word poskim like Rav Shlomo Zalman, the word poskim were held like Ramosha, Rav Vadi Yosef, and his son Rav Yitzchak Yosef, and Rav Shlomo Zalman Orbach all held that you shouldn't use the heter of Holchei Drachim for discretionary leisure trips. But as we mentioned earlier, a number of other Gedolei poskim, including Rav Aaron Lichtenstein, and Rav Zalman Nechemi Goldberg, and Rav Asher Weiss, and Rav Yashiv, who's not a big maker. Rav Yashiv is very machmer on these things. Rav Nissen Karelitz all say that Holchei Drachim, Teishu Kein Taduru, Holchei Drachim extends even to leisure trips. Lamaisa, many of these posts can point out, though, even if it's technically mutter, it's not so appropriate to avail yourself of this heter. Rav Karelitz says it's a shtus, he says. It's to give up a precious mitzvah of sukkah because you want to go on a trip, that's a shtus. Rav Yashiv says if you have to go on the trip, you can rely on Holchei Drachim, but ideally you shouldn't. Rav Aaron Lichtenstein says it's not the right thing to do. He says he remembers when he lived in Chutz La'aretz, he says sukkah wasn't that easy. He says no one ever asked him about Holchei Drachim. He says business people, a business person who's medactic in mitzvahs, he would avoid eating his lunch in his office. He didn't say I have a heter of Holchei Drachim. Again, my father used to point this out that there is a heter of Holchei Drachim, but people, the minute gets to be strict about this. People don't use such a term. A student in university spends a long day in a university library. He wouldn't think of eating in the cafeteria, assuming he's a Yerei Shemayim and a medactic b'mitzvahs, because Holchei Drachim. I mean, we don't want to rely on Holchei Drachim. It's not a great heter. Rav Aaron Lichtenstein says, and in Eretz Yisrael, where sukkah is is easier and it's more inclusive, even those who are not so observant try to do it. Here we're going to start looking for leniencies. He says a Jew must be saturated with an ambition and longing for mitzvahs, and not chas v'shalom view them as a burden that he's inescapably stuck with, that he tries to cast off at the first opportunity. On Daf Chav Zayin, the Gemara brings machlokas. When do you have to eat in the sukkah? You can't eat bread, certain types. You can't sleep or eat bread outside the sukkah. But if a person doesn't want to eat bread, does he have to eat bread in the sukkah every day? Rabbi Eliezer says you have to eat 14 meals twice a day in the sukkah. We paskin not like that. We paskin like the Chachamim. Ein l'davar kitzvah. If you don't want to eat, you don't have to eat. Chutz milele harishon shel chag b'lvad. The first night you have to eat, just like matzah. You have to eat matzah the first night. The rest of Pesach, you want to eat potatoes or meat, you can do that. Fruit, sukkah as well. The first night you must eat in the sukkah. You must eat bread in the sukkah. The rest of sukkahs you can't eat outside the sukkah. If you eat, you have to eat in the sukkah. But if you don't eat here, that's fine. The first night is a special chiyuv though. This idea that the first night is a chiyuv has an additional ramification. There is a major machlokes rishonim. We're going to get to the Gemara soon. The Gemara says, rain. If it rains, you're potter from the sukkah. There's a major machlokes whether this applies the first night as well. The Shulchan Aruch says, yarduk shamim potter, you go inside. The Ramah says that applies to the rest of sukkahs. But the first night, a well-known halacha, the first night, you must eat a kizayis in the sukkah even if it rains. But the Mishnah Berurah explains it's actually a big machlokes. Even the Ramah concedes the halacha, it's a big machlokes. So l'chumra you eat in the rain. But first of all, you don't make a bracha, because some Rishonim say that the first night, even though there's a chiyuv to eat in the sukkah, the rules of rain and mitzvah and so on are the same the first night. So the first night as well, you potter, and therefore even though l'chumra misafik we eat in the sukkah in the first night of the rain, but you don't make a bracha of leisha b'sukkah, because safik bracha is lahakel. And the reason for those who say that the first night is a chiyuv even if it rains is because our Gemara says, why the first night is it a chiyuv? You learn from Pesach, Gzera Shava, Chamisha Asar. Just like the first night of Pesach, you must eat matzah, so the first night of Sukkot, you must eat in the Sukkah. And some say that applies to Mitzvah as well. When it comes to Pesach also, there's no p'tur of Mitzvah that Kizayas of the first night. Therefore, Sukkot as well. The chiyuv of the first night is totally different. It doesn't have the rules of rain and Mitzvah. Other posts can say no. The Gzera Shava is just that you have to eat. But the rules of eating are the same as the rest of Sukkot. So Mitzvah is Pater, and rain is Pater. So Misafik we eat. Misafik we eat, but we don't make a bracha. Misafik brachas lahakel. Furthermore, the post can say, let's say it stops raining, you should eat again, because bishlam, if you hold that the first night there's no p'tur mitzvah, so you ate in the rain, you're yotzi. You don't have to eat again. But other Rishonim say the first night is the same as every other night, that you're potter when you're mitzvah, and if you ate in the rain, that's not the mitzvah. So if it stops raining, now you have to do the mitzvah. You weren't yotzi before, so you should eat again. Some posts can say, therefore, if it rains, a person should stay up to chatzos and shouldn't eat because he should be able to eat with the bracha when it doesn't rain. The Mishnah Berurah says other achronim say it's not kedai to wait so long, and it's a tremendous tremendous infringement on Simchas Yom Tov to wait so long without eating. And therefore, they say you should wait a little bit, you should wait an hour or two, wait an hour or two if it stops raining. If it doesn't stop raining, then you eat a kazayas in the sukkah, and then you go eat and the rest of the food inside. If it does stop raining, then we said you go back outside, because Misafik, you weren't really Yotze, according to the other Rishonim, that there is a p'tur of rain the first night, you weren't Yotze, and you have to go back out, and now you have to eat. That's only if you didn't go to sleep yet. If it was still raining, so you went to sleep, and now you don't have to get up and out of bed, because now we say manavshach. If mitzvah is potter min sukkah, then getting out after you went to sleep, dragging yourself out of bed outside is mitzvah. And if mitzvah is chayev, you have to get out of bed, be ready yotzi, because when you waited the rain, you're also mitzvah. So manavshach. If mitzvah is potter, then once you're in bed, you don't have to go out again. If mitzvah is chayev, you're ready yotzi when it rains, and you don't have to get out of bed and go back out to the sukkah. On Daf Chavches, the Mishnah says that throughout the 7 days of Sukkos, a person makes the Sukkah keva and beiso arai. His house should only be temporary. If it rains, and he's pater, because again, that the mitzvah pater min sukkah. Some say rain is beyond the regular din of mitzvah, but basically it's a p'tur similar, at least similar to mitzvah. How much rain? Misha tisrach hamikvah. When a certain dish becomes spoiled, at that point, there's enough rain that you can go inside. The Gemara says. The Gemara says that first of all, before we get to the rain, so this basic din that you treat the sukkah the way you treat your house. The Mishnah goes on and it says that the Gemara brings a brisa that says throughout the 7 days you make sukkaso keva beiso arai kalim noam. If you have nice kalim, you bring them out to the sukkah. Matzos, nose, spreads, and furniture, you bring them out to the sukkah. Ochel b'shoseh, matayel b'sukkah. You eat in the sukkah, you drink in the sukkah, you're matayel, you spend your leisure time in the sukkah. All 7 days, all 7 days, Teshru Kain Taduru, and so on, as we just said. Shulchan Aruch said, Ochel v'shoseh v'yashin v'matayel in the sukkah, and you live in the sukkah the way you live in your house. Mishnah Berurah says, if you want to talk, if you want to just pay a social visit, talk to your friend, do that in the sukkah as well. However, the Mishnah Berurah brings from the Achronim, that the sukkah has great kedusha. So really, a person should avoid doing divrei chol, just talking about mundane matters in the sukkah. You should talk about kedusha and tara. Certainly, you shouldn't talk lashon hara and rechilas and prohibited types of speech. They bring, however, from the Matei Ephraim that a person who's not discussing Torah right now, he's not talking Torah. So should he say, okay, instead of talking about neutral things, I should just be quiet and not talk about anything? Matei Ephraim says, first of all, that would involve bittul simchas yantif. If you have no Torah to talk about, to just refuse to speak at all is an infringement on Simchas Yom Tov, and also a person, that's a madrega, a person shouldn't try to adopt such a posture of piety if he's not really holding on that level. They bring a machlokas also, sukkah is supposed to be the ikar dira of sukkahs, and your house is not your house. So some posts can actually say, the Chayadim and El Yerabba, that a person should set the table, put the tablecloth on in the sukkah, not in the house, because the house is not my dira. I want to show that the sukkah is my dira, so I set a nice table in the sukkah. I don't set a nice table in the house. Other posts can say, Pri Megadim, Matei Ephraim, that the minhag is to have a nice table in the house as well, because it's Simchas Yom Tov, so you should really set the table. Even if you plan on eating in the sukkah, you should set the table in the house as well. The Gemara goes on and talks about learning Torah in the sukkah. The Gemara says, Mishanin b'sukkah. So the Gemara says, Akasha. The Rava said, Mikro Mishnah. When you're simply reading Chumash and learning basic Mishnayos, things that you do that in the sukkah. But Tanui, when you're learning Gemara, when you're trying to understand reasons, when you're engaged in analysis and thinking on a more intense level, that you do outside the sukkah. Rashi says it means if you want outside the sukkah, you're patur because you're mitzvah. Mitzvah patur min sukkah. So the Gemara thinks that stira. When you do the iyun, the Gemara, do you learn in the sukkah? Do you learn in your house? So the Gemara says migras and a unit. The difference is between migras and a unit. Rashi says there are two kinds of learning Gemara: things that you learned already. That you basically know that you should do in the sukkah. It doesn't require the same level of iyun. B'yune, learning new things, that needs more. It's hard to do in the sukkah. That you can go into the house. The Taz brings from the Ran lahepach. Iyune, more intense learning is keva, and that needs to be in the sukkah, like eating and sleeping and drinking. But lighter forms of learning is not as keva, can be done in the house. And the Taz says, l'chumra aved kitarvayu. As long as you can do it without experiencing real tzara, you should do everything in the sukkah. Shulchan Aruch paskins like Rashi, that kore b'toch sukkah. But when you're doing iyun, maven, umedaktik, mashayikra, a more intense kind of limud outside the sukkah, so you can have more yishuv hadas, more clarity. The Mishnah Berurah says that sometimes the sukkah is easier because it's pleasant in the sukkah. Sometimes it's cold in the sukkah, so then you go into the house. The bottom line is you learn wherever you'll be more effective, wherever the learning will work better. Furthermore, the Mishnah Berurah gives the example: if it's cold, it's hard to learn in the sukkah. But they bring that there were those who actually brought ovens to the sukkah, so they can learn better, so they can sleep better. Pri Megadim says someone who does that ashrei lo, it's the right thing to do. They bring the Chavetz Chaim and Rav Chaim Soloveitchik used to bring an oven, a heater into the sukkah to be able to learn and do the mitzvahs of sukkah without having tsar. Of course, fires in the sukkah can be very dangerous. There are people bring space heaters, they can fall over, they can short circuit if they're unattended. Obviously, you have to be careful not to start fires. But ideally, a person should take measures to be able to do the functions of dira, achila, shtia, limud, even limud, do it comfortably in the sukkah. The Shulchan Aruch goes on and says, what about davening? Davening, you can daven either in the sukkah or chutz l'sukkah. Mishnah Berurah says it means wherever you'll be able to have more kavanah, wherever it'll be more peaceful, wherever the davening will be better, that's where you should daven. If a person has a shul, then certainly he can leave the sukkah to go to shul to daven in the shul. Because again, Peshru King Taduru, a person leaves his house to go to shul, he can leave the sukkah to go to shul as well. And they bring from the Shulchan Aruch Harav, if someone learns in a Beis Midrash, if he learns at home, then learn in the sukkah. But if you go to the Beis Midrash to learn, then you can learn then you can leave the sukkah to go to the Beis Midrash as well, because that's a place that is suitable for learning. If a person has kircha to bring the svarim out, he has a lot of svarim, it's hard to drag them all out to the sukkah, then efshir that you're patur from learning in the sukkah. A person has a place, he has room for a bookcase to put his svarim for all week of sukkahs. That's not a kircha, that's building the sukkah, set up the sukkah, bring your svarim out. If you can do that, then you really should do that as well. On Daf Chav Tes, the Mishnah said if it rains, then you're patur, you should tisrach a mikvah. What is mikvah? It's a tavshil of grisin, it's a cooked dish of a kind of bean. The Gemara brings that there was a case where there was a wind blowing and bits of stuff were falling into the food. Rav Yosef says, I'm leaving the sukkah. So the Gemara says, that's not tisrach hamikvah, that's a lesser degree of tsar. So Rav Yosef said that he was anina datai, he was very finicky. For him, these things really bothered him, so he was patur even with this lesser degree of rain. We pass in the basic share of tisrach hamikvah, that once it rains, that the food of mikvah will be spoiled by the rain. That's enough to say that you're patur. The Rama adds even ein tav shulafanav. Even if you don't have the cooked food, if there's that much rain, even if you're not eating, you don't have that sensitive food in front of you, then you're still allowed to go in. Then a very practical point, the Rama said, Misha ain't a baki b'zeh asher. If you don't know exactly what that is, how much rain there has to be, you can just say, if in your house you would leave a room that had that much rain, then you can leave the sukkah as well. And that, I think, is the share that we're used to using. If there's enough rain falling in the sukkah that you would leave the room in your house, if there was that much rain, then you leave the sukkah as well. Mishnah Berurah says this din of mitzvah is not limited to rain. It applies to sherev, it applies to heat and to bugs, yitushim. Even if a person is, even if you're not mitzvah, the food is being damaged by these things, or because of cold, if the food is, fatty foods are congealing and it's not pleasant. So all these are reasons to leave the sukkah. He brings in the Bikur Yaakov, though, he says, if a person can, without undue trouble, can mitigate the problem, his food is congealing, he can use a warming dish, he can have a dish with hot water that'll keep the food suitable and able to be eaten, then you're not patur from the sukkah. So, all these halachas of mitzvah, of course, these are things that we live with, the rain, and other kinds of mitzvah as well. The Mishnah Berurah is focusing on the food, but the truth is, poskim bring mitzvah not just with regard to food, they bring mitzvah with general discomfort as well. Most famously in the context of sleeping. The Gemara all over it says that a person sleeps in the sukkah. As a matter of fact, when it wants to say that a sukkah is valid or not, it says, or a part of the sukkah is valid, it says yishenim tachtav, ein yishenim tachtav. Sleeping is one of the essential things you do in the sukkah. So why don't many people sleep in the sukkah bismanos, yeah? So this is an old question going back centuries to the time of the Rishonim. The Ramah brings, why don't people sleep in the sukkah? Only those who are medaktik b'mitzvahs, ordinary people don't sleep in the sukkah. Ramah brings from the Mordechai, some say it's because it was very cold. So cold is not just a problem for congealing food, apparently. Cold is a problem for sleeping. I guess eating, if the food is not congealing, you can eat in the cold, you'll be all right. But sleeping, it's hard to sleep when it's freezing. So there was tsar of sleeping in the cold. Ramah says, and other Acharonim say a different reason, that has to do with the fact that you can't be with your wife. So what does that mean? You can't be with your wife? You don't have enough privacy in the sukkah. So therefore what? So there are two variations of this reason. The Ramah says the reason is because mitzvah sukkah is ishu beso, ish ve'ishto, kederach shu dar kol hashana. A person lives together with his wife all year, so he has to be able to live and sleep together with his wife in the same room all year long. And if you can't do that, then that's not then you're parted from the sukkah. However, the Ramah makes the obvious point. If that's the whole problem, tov lahachmer, you should be machmer to be with your wife in the sukkah. If you can make a separate sukkah. We spend time and money to build a sukkah, so build another room, build a separate sukkah. So the Ramah says that's not really a great reason, because if that's the whole problem, so find a place we can be with your wife. Other poskim say have a variation of this reason. The Gra disagreed with this reason. The Magen Avraham said a variation of this reason, that if a person can be with his wife intimately, then that's mitzvah. A person wants to be with his wife and he can't, that's mitzvah, you're part of sukkah. Shabura points out, according to that reason, so if anyway on a particular night that isn't on your agenda, it's not an ona, then that p'tur doesn't apply. So these are different reasons. Again, you see mitzvah is not limited to food. Mitzvah applies to other cases as well. But again, as both with regard to food, Bikur Yaakov's suggestion of having a warming dish to keep the food from congealing, as well as with regard to sleeping, where with your wife having a separate sukkah, and the third place we had this is with regard to the ovens. We saw that some Acharonim recommend if a person can't learn, he can't function in the sukkah because it's too cold, the right thing to do, the ideal thing to do, again, assuming you can do it safely, the right thing to do is to bring some kind of heater into the sukkah in order to be able to fulfill the mitzvah of sukkah without having the p'tur of mitzvah.